Why can't I know who's making these decisions, who's blacklisting entire news organizations on the basis of their politics, for example? It's part of the propaganda campaign, which is the real war. So if you're not allowed to edit Wikipedia for pay on behalf of, say, a PR agency, how are you allowed to do it on behalf of an intelligence agency?
Tucker Carlson just exposed how the U.S. intel agencies control Wikipedia, one of the most prominent sources of information on the internet. And in this clip, he talks to one of the co-creators of Wikipedia about how that tool is used to, let's just say, blacklist certain people that the feds don't exactly like. So let's get their take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
So my question is, there's nothing that can be done. They're protected by 230 immunity.
Yeah.
So they can't be sued into better behavior.
Right.
But presumably they can be shamed and reasoned with. And the first step in that is just asking the question, on what grounds are you keeping the identities of some of the most powerful people in the country secret? Why can't I know who's making these decisions, who's blacklisting entire news organizations on the basis of their politics, for example? Who's responsible for the slander? Why can't I know their names? What would Wikipedia, the foundation, say if I asked that question?
They would say that according to the policies of the editorial side of their organization, which they're not responsible for, people can participate anonymously at all levels, right? So you could be the most powerful person on the editorial side, and you don't need to reveal your identity. It's a matter of policy. Now,
Talk about a non-answer. They're hiding their identities because they're allowed to. Okay, got it.
Well, yes.
Okay. But why are they allowed to?
Okay, so I think the answer is basically it goes back to like the zeitgeist of 1990s hacker culture, when people went on like these funny names, nicknames, handles, not their real names. And that has continued. It never stopped. All across Wikipedia, people use these sort of cutesy names, and they like to portray themselves to the public as just, mop-wielding janitors of the site.
Yeah, their screen names, they've been around since, news groups, Prodigy, AOL. Remember back in the day, if you're my age, you had stacks of those CDs from AOL. But it seems like also a convenient way to head off Fed intervention being exposed to the general public, and to conceal that from the public when you have high-profile editors making very important decisions on prominent people with Bunny Dude 64 as a screen name. And Wikipedia is in a weird place because they're saying that this is all about neutrality and trying to maintain a neutral information base about people. But we can see it completely skews in the direction of the regime on so many things. And I'm so glad that Tucker has this interview.
And of course, it's ludicrous. Right, but it's just as far as I can tell, it's a game that they're playing. They're putting on the air of being like harmless college students that are only interested in comma placement and that sort of thing. So why do you need to know my identity and so forth? But I'll tell you, people they just haven't pressed them on this question.
Well, and they should be pressed immediately. And I mean, because just in practical terms, as you said, it's ludicrous. Who has more effect on Americans or the world's understanding of history, the 7 history departments of the Ivy League or Wikipedia? It's not even close. It's not even close, not in the same universe.
Yes.
But if all of a sudden every history professor at Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Columbia, Dartmouth, Cornell, et cetera, decided, I'm not telling you my name as I teach your kids about the Renaissance or whatever, we would say that's freaking nuts. Of course you have to know your name.
Right. And, traditional media organizations, they name their editors and their journalists, of course. They have real world reputation to live up to.
Yes.
And if they do bad reporting, then they can be fired. They experience career consequences.
That's the thing about Wikipedia. They have a policy where, you can be anonymous editing information that's very important, very persuasive, taken in by lots of Americans, and they say their policy is all about a neutral point of view. You can't include original research. It just has to be links to verified sources. But people do that selectively in singular directions. And when it's not tied to an individual, when you make mistakes, when you mislead people, deliberately or not, and suffer no consequences because, you're behind the facade of this avatar that doesn't make sense, people tend to look down upon that. And it really, skirts any kind of responsibility for Wikipedia when they can just cite that as the direction and as the basis for their site. And don't get me wrong, I'm not arguing for, not allowing individuals that are anonymous or carry, a screen name onto social media platforms. Nothing of the sort. I don't think that any social media network should be policed in that way. But then also, U.S. citizens have the right and ability to discern that might not be the most reliable source then. That might not be the way that we look for information, sift through it, use our reason, and deduce whether something is of merit or not. It's, anonymous editors that have no reputation tied into the claims they're making. It's not something that, a lot of people would want to engage in or facilitate or entertain if they looked into it deeply.
And that simply doesn't happen on Wikipedia. Now, people, they can mess up on Wikipedia and be kicked out. They can lose their administratorship, whatever. That happens, I suppose. But it's not real world consequences, is it? Not really.
No, it's not. And so I'm sort of getting to one of my core concerns, which you've made me think is something to be concerned about, which is the influence of intelligence agencies on the work product of Wikipedia. It's very obvious to me, having been around that world a lot, that they're influencing some of the answers, some of the entries on Wikipedia. It's just like super, super obvious. It's part of the propaganda campaign, which is the real war, the info war. And you must have thought of that when you were building this thing. Like, man, the intel agencies could get involved and start changing the way people understand what they did, for example.
No.
You didn't? You never thought of that?
No, I had no such idea. Not in 2001, in 2000, 2002. No, I mean, I was a babe in the woods. Yes, it wasn't until I think it was 2006, 2007, Virgil Griffiths did master's research. He came up with a tool called Wikiscanner that enabled people to look up the IP addresses of people who had done edits and who had edited which articles. And so they were able to find a whole bunch of edits coming from Langley.
Of course they were. Of course they were. That's hilarious. That's the best story imaginable. And that's what Tucker snuffed out right there. Look at him laughing too. Absolutely the case. I've used Wikipedia a long time actually for research, just checking what the official Wikipedia narrative is on certain subjects. That is the case, and we know it to be true, but the government's tentacles are entrenched into Wikipedia too, just through that process. How many edits have been coming from Langley? Well, a significant amount, according to the co-creator.
No. Oh, I didn't even know that.
No, it's true.
Not to brag. I could just tell by reading it, because I know what that is, right? So
I since have learned differently and learned much better. I don't have the background that you have, but it's also very clear to me what we are told about the way that intelligence works now is that of course, there's the old-fashioned cloak and dagger spying going on, but a large part of the remit of intelligence today is to manipulate public opinion in various ways. And Wikipedia is just a gold mine for the intelligence agencies of the world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, there's no better gold mine than a chief source of information for I don't know, vast swaths of the public. I don't have the empirics on this, but I know a lot of people get basic information from Wikipedia. I think AI like ChatGPT and Grok is taking over a lot of the informational sources comparatively over time, but a lot of that information comes from Wikipedia, presumably, and other sites on the internet. I believe him totally when he says in 2001 this wasn't on his radar at all, and why would it be? I mean, the internet was around for quite some time. You had the World Wide Web for quite a while at that point. But the information war isn't what it is now, where, we are in a war for information, and what narrative is going to lead the day, regardless of whether something is true or false. The regime considers the narrative to be much more important than what is true and what is not. Their intention is to lead us in a direction that will empower them, allow for more wars, more propaganda, more surveillance state, more police state, more taxation, extortion, welfare to the biggest corporations in the world, more central economic planning, more things that fleece us of our rights and give them to people that are either well-connected in government or well-connected to government in the form of the business community.
Because it's like a one-stop shop. You can just like type in the things that you want people to believe, I suppose. Now, how that works, like which agencies are involved, how the heck should I know?
Well, you can tell by reading it. You can tell instantly by reading it. Some of what's going on. I mean, you never know the whole story, of course, but it's super obvious to me. Some of the players in this, very obvious, and they're the big ones, of course. Mm-hmm. So, but my question, and everything you've said makes sense. My question, however, is like, how is this allowed? So if you're not allowed to edit Wikipedia for pay on behalf of, say, a PR agency, mm-hmm. how are you allowed to do it on behalf of an intelligence agency?
Well, that's a good question. I guess they'd selectively enforce those guidelines, it seems, if you take it from the co-creator of Wikipedia, who now does not share an interest in how Wikipedia is run. But this is interesting. I didn't know that much about this and how tied into the government it was. I mean, I should always know that based on the Twitter files and what we learned from there, because we learned that there were secret channels through which social media companies communicated with the government and collaborated to remove certain types of speech, police disinformation, and ban certain users. That happened a lot on Twitter. I mean, Alex Berenson comes to mind right away on that when he talked about the COVID crisis, the COVID lockdown regime. He didn't carry the water like the rest of the New York Times. And, I don't think he was at the New York Times at that point, but he suffered immensely for that. He got banned off Twitter. He's just one example, but there are lots of others. Alex Jones kind of set the precedent for a lot of people that would be banned off social media. The President of the United States was banned off Twitter for specious reasons. And that's what you get from this conglomeration, this collaborative scheme between big government and big tech to censor users. And then the government just shrugs its shoulders and says, that's just a private company doing it. No, that is using a private company as an appendage of the state. It's what Mussolini talked about when he talked about merging the power of corporations with the power of the state. That was fascism at its base. I mean, I didn't directly quote him there, but that was the idea behind it. And if we're to say that, Trump is fascist, fair enough. I mean, the entire American system has been that for many decades, as far as I'm concerned, giving trade privileges and special subsidies to certain companies at the detriment of others and all would-be competition, using like FDA regulatory schemes to keep competition away from the big players, and then saying that, all we need is just more regulations. Well, some of the biggest corporations in the world agree with you because the little guys can't swallow the regulatory costs, but they can. And that's what regulatory capture does. And that's where we're at. Same thing is true with the big tech and government alliance. But what did you think about this? Are you surprised that the feds have infiltrated Wikipedia, have made edits that have been accepted, and there's a disconnect and hypocrisy when it comes to them being allowed to do that, but people working on the part of a PR firm are not? Let me know down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to Tucker Carlson too. Also, please consider becoming a YouTube member. If you click the join button below, you can help support my channel. And in return, I'll give you access to all my videos before they go live to the general public. Those are the members only videos. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.